Hello and welcome back. So this is part 2 of my very mini series on PMS in the voice. And if you missed part 1, I will put the link below. And basically in part 1, I talked about a lot of the common symptoms that you might experience as part of PMS or PMVS, which is premenstrual vocal syndrome. And so one of the most fascinating things to come out of this for me, through all the research that I've done, is this idea that the vocal folds also have a menstrual cycle, much like our cervix. And so it is therefore going to be affected by PMS to some extent. And again, this varies from woman to woman because we don't all experience PMS in the same way. And if you are on an oral contraception, you probably won't have any of these symptoms. But for those of you, and I'm sure you know if you're someone that struggles with PMS, then you probably will find there'll be some symptoms that are affecting your voice. So just to reiterate the 5 main symptoms that I talked about: vocal fatigue, dryness in the voice, clearing your throat often, loss of power, and loss of range. Now, some of those you may not notice so much if you're not a singer, but still just to be aware of this. So in part 2, I wanted to share some ways that you could work with this. If you know that this is an issue for you and you've recognized some of these symptoms in your voice, I wanted to give you 10 ways that you can work with your voice. So just to be aware also that some of these symptoms can be caused by other things. So for example, like myself, if you suffer from allergies, you may find that your voice feels drier and a bit tickly. If you're sleep deprived, your voice is probably gonna feel fatigued. So you may have PMS symptoms, but you may also have other things that are contributing to it. So just to be aware what else is going on in my life when I'm going through this kind of PMS period in my life. So these ideas that I'm going to share with you now are really important if you are a high voice user. If you are someone that uses your voice sort of just for general conversation each day, it probably doesn't really matter. But if you're someone like a teacher, a lecturer, a trainer, a consultant, someone that's literally speaking all day long, these are going to be really important, and you will really notice a difference if you start to apply some of this to your voice. So the human voice is really complex, and so we want to maybe approach this in a couple of ways. So first of all, we want to develop a really good vocal hygiene. And vocal hygiene is really taking care of our voice. So that could be, which I'm going to talk about some of these things in a minute, but it could be things like warming up your voice, hydration, things like that. And the other aspect to this as well is seeing your voice as part of a wider body system. Our voice doesn't work in isolation. It's very much affected by everything else going on around it. So for example, if you have a lot of tension or tightness or pain in your shoulders or your neck from being hunched over a computer all day, it's going to affect your voice. So we want to look at the voice within the wider body system as well. So I am going to touch on that too. So number 1, which I've kind of already mentioned, is hydration. It's probably the most important thing you can do for your voice, regardless of whether you're struggling with PMS or not. The voice functions best when it's really hydrated. And you want to think about hydration, both internal hydration, so drinking lots of water, but also external. How moist is the air? Is the air very dry? Am I in an office that's really dry? Am I on a stage where, probably not so much at the moment with lockdown, but am I under lots of like lights that are really drying? So just be very aware of the environment that you're in. And you might want to think about getting a humidifier for the room, or even using a personal steamer. And then of course you want to avoid things that you know dehydrate your voice. And just to be aware, because the voice is drier during this time, you're going to want to up your hydration even more than normal. So number 2 is vocal warm-ups. And I know so many voice users that aren't singers really struggle with this, because I don't often think that, in my experience anyway, they really warm their voice up very often. And so I'm talking about people like teachers and lecturers and trainers and call center workers who are talking all day long. Warming your voice up is so important to keep the voice supple and to oxygenate the laryngeal muscles. Now, I understand if you're not a singer, you may not know what to do, how to warm up your voice. So I'm going to put a link below to a video to show you how you can start to warm up your voice as a speaker. So number 3 is vocal naps. And this is essentially giving yourself complete vocal rest at little stages throughout the day. And it doesn't need to be more than 15 minutes, sort of 10 to 15 minutes at a time would be perfect. This is really important if you know, for example, you've got a day of teaching, a day of meetings. I would really advise that you schedule this in as if it's a meeting and just commit to not speaking at all. No singing, no whispering, no speaking, not even to your dog or your cat or whoever. Number 4, coming back to what I said earlier, is remembering that the voice doesn't operate in isolation. It's in our neck, essentially. So everything around it is going to affect our voice. And so for that reason, if you know, like myself, for example, that I have a lot of tightness and tension in my shoulders and my neck, and I think many of us do these days because we're sitting over computers and phones, but if you know that that is a problem for you, I really advise and suggest that you do some stretches just to kind of, again, keep everything supple around the voice, around the larynx. I love yoga, and there are so many yoga videos on YouTube now. You could easily find something like a 10-15 minute yoga practice just to kind of stretch out your shoulders, your back, your neck, because a lot of people struggle with this just from sitting at a computer. But it's really going to help to free the muscles around your voice. Number 5 is warming up the articulators. Now, again, I've done videos on this. So articulators are the parts of our body that we use to articulate sound. So the jaw, the tongue, the lips, the soft palate. These are really important because for so many of us, they hold a lot of tension, particularly when we're stressed or we're anxious. We tend to kind of grip our jaw or we tense our tongue. And these are really important for optimal articulation and allowing that voice to kind of freely move. So again, I'm going to put some links below. If you know that you hold a lot of tension in your jaw, which many of us do, then I really encourage you to do some simple warm-ups to start to loosen that jaw up as well. So number 6 is minerals and vitamins. And multivitamins are really great during this time in our monthly cycle, particularly vitamin A, B6, B5, C, and E. Also minerals such as magnesium, copper, phosphorus, iron, calcium, and zinc. And also, just as an aside, if you like pineapple, it's a really good anti-inflammatory fruit. So just trying to get as much of this into your diet as possible around this time will really help your voice. So number 7 and 8 are really about medication. Now, obviously I'm not a doctor, so always consult your doctor. But what we do know is some medications dry the voice out. Things like antihistamines, decongestants, diuretics. And so if you're someone that relies on those medications and you need them for, you've been told that this is what you should be taking, I would suggest that when you do take them during this period where your voice is already drier than normal, that you just drink a lot more water than you normally would, and try and leave the gap as long as possible between taking the medication and then having to speak for hours on end. Or, if you're performing, if you're singing for a long period of time. So just try and drink more water when you take them, if you do have to take them. But on that note as well, which is number 8, is aspirin. And again, if you can avoid aspirin around this time, which can often, I know for me, be a challenge because I sometimes get hormonal headaches. And so sometimes I want to take aspirin for that. But just to bear in mind that during this sort of PMS stage, the vocal folds are much more sensitive, the blood vessels are more delicate. And so in some extreme cases, if you're not careful and you do overload the voice and really sort of put too much strain and force through the voice, you can actually cause a vocal hemorrhage. So just be wary of that with aspirin. But again, this is only really if you have really high usage of your voice. 2 more. So number 9, some other natural remedies which you might like to think about. And actually the great thing about these oils is you can put them in a steamer if you decide that you want to use a steamer. So peppermint oil, lemon oil, lavender oil, they're all really great. So you could put them in that steamer. Then things like ginger, garlic, raw honey, chamomile tea, and marshmallow root. So they're all really great for your voice. And finally, number 10 is, if possible, if you have a really big meeting or you've got a really big gig or a big concert, if there's any way you can, and you know that these symptoms are a real issue for you, try and avoid this time in your cycle. Try and set dates for things when your voice isn't at its most sort of sensitive and inflamed. And then, it's one less thing to worry about. But of course, that isn't necessarily possible. So I get that. But if you can do it, your voice will thank you for it. So I hope that's really helped. And if you have any questions, please post them below. This isn't an exhaustive list. This was just 10 things that I came up with. And I will put all the links below for all the videos that I've mentioned. But if you want me to do any other videos on anything specific, then please do comment below. Thank you, and I'll see you on another video.